Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business, presented by FL Montreal. As always, Dan Delmar and Mike Newton with you. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm excellent. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Today on the program, we're talking tech, and this is a pretty interesting company, Hookmotion. They help businesses like casinos optimize their monitoring processes. So they use automated table tracking and software to help detect fraud and eliminate errors. Another example of local Quebec tech making an impact internationally, Mike.
Yeah, we keep getting these great guests at the end of the day that continue to show us just how good our marketplace is in building young, strong entrepreneurs. And I think this is going to continue for some time to come. I don't know if this is a byproduct of years and years of government support on the R&D side, if that is finally starting to take its toll, or whether the universities have really been pushing these entrepreneurials. I know with you've got different scenarios that are popping up on a regular basis. You've got Centec that's working as the incubator. So there's a lot of action out there, a lot of good things happening, and we've had quite a few of them on our show this year, and it's really great to see.
So Mathieu Clas is going to be along. He's the founder of Hookmotion, and in that environment, I've only really been to a casino maybe a dozen times or so, but I've seen the movies and Ocean's 11, and you get a sense of how intense the systems are there. People are watched all the time in every different angle. So it's a really interesting process. And now it's being aided by AI. So that's what this product, Hookmotion, is all about. Mathieu will tell us about it in a little bit. And I wanted to take some time to talk about pressure in the workplace, Mike. And you wanted to talk about the science of choking. And certainly when you're in a high pressure environment, like a casino, for example, I mean, when the stakes are literally high and you have to be on a constant watch for threats to your business, pressure becomes a whole other thing. It's something that you should study with science and study with as a best practice. You read this piece from Harvard Business Review, The Science of Choking Under Pressure. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think this whole discussion of choking under pressure, I mean, for those people that are sports fans, obviously, you can relate to it probably a lot more than you can think of in the office space. But it's there's 2 minutes to go, and Tom Brady gets the ball, and he runs, goes down the field and scores, and you wonder why can't every other quarterback or somebody do what they need to do in those environments. And you look at this and you go, hey, there's a reason why people have mastered their ability to control their mindset and things. And the science of choking, really what it is those people that are generally more conducive to high pressure are going to end up finding finding a way to try and go around their own issues. And somebody made the example of you put your hand up in class and you got this great answer, and you kind of say, okay, great, I'm gonna answer the teacher. And then as soon as the teacher says yes, Mike, and your hand goes down, the entire class turns and looks at you, and you go, you freeze, right? So that's choking under pressure. And I think that those that are subject to the optimal performances and are constantly being put out there, obviously have a much higher pressure put on them on a regular basis. So you either become the Tom Brady's of the world, or you become the not so Tom Brady's of the world and find yourself one year as a quarterback, as opposed to whatever it is, 25. So you look at this environment and you say, hey, what is it that I need to do as an individual? And how do I then take that to school or to work? And how do I address on these things? And in most cases, pressure is something that we put ourselves under. And we need to learn how to cope and adapt our own behavior mechanisms in order to deal with these things. And the article starts talking about, certain things that you need to do in order to address how you handle pressure. And I will point out that this is going to be different for everybody. Everybody has a different tolerance level. Everybody has a different ability for risk management, and everybody has a different ability for what they can carry on their shoulders. You need to understand how it affects you and how to address it. If you're going to do a presentation in a boardroom, how do you expect to be dealt with? So some of the things you want to do is you need to be there over and over again. You need to constantly have yourself in that space. You can't walk into a presentation, or you can't walk into a football game if you're not prepared. Okay, you need to be there. You need to have your head in the game. You need to be constantly looking at it. You need to practice for pressure. I mean, let's face it, the very first time anybody's ever faced pressure in their life, chances are there was a little bit of cracking under pressure. So how do you deal with that? You got to put yourself in an environment where you're constantly mastering pressure. Why do pro sports teams practice? They practice because pressure's coming, and you can. It's one thing to throw a quarterback touchdown in practice. It's another thing when you got 300-pound linemen running into your face. So you have to look at how you're going to adjust it. Develop a pre-performance routine. Now this is going to be different for everybody. One of the things I find interesting here is some people need to be overly prepared. Okay. Other people find that over preparedness ends up resulting in a very stiff presentation. I happen to be one of those people. I like to fly by the seat of my pants on a lot of things. And I do find that the key to that area is I'm really not prepared. I'm talking about a subject. I'm in an area that I already know. So my confidence level is already there. But if I go in and I got a 12 slide presentation and I start reading from the slides, you can put the snooze button on because I'm going to put you to sleep real quick. Okay. And don't just think so. Do it. Do what you have to do. Develop that stress mindset. Develop that ability to play under pressure, to deal with the staff around you, and then obviously rationalize the event and look at those bumps. My favorite exercise is to try and interpret what questions are going to come my way before I even start an exercise. Why? Because that way, when they come my way, what would I ask? Where would my mind be if I was going to ask a question? And try and put yourselves in that side, because now all of a sudden you've got so much more confidence in what you're doing.
I don't want to be the type of person that says there are two kinds of people. But are there two kinds of people in this respect? Are there one kind who really flourish under pressure and the other who flounder under pressure?
Um, I'm not sure that that is a from birth thing. It's the whole discussion of leadership, right? Is a leader created or a leader born? I don't know if people crumble under pressure from birth. I think a large part of it is learned behavior. I do feel that you can take somebody that has a lack of confidence and allow them the confidence in whatever works in their way to move them forward to do certain things. I've watched some very successful people, okay, who, so long as the pressure is not on too hot and heavy, are wonderful. And as soon as the pressure comes on, they crack. But you can usually tell, and certainly in a work environment and a team environment, you get this opportunity where you're looking and you go, "Hey, wait a second here. I can tell you before who's going to exceed and who's not." COVID was a great example. I mean, everybody went home a little over 2 years ago, and I could have written a list of who was going to outperform and who was going to underperform based on having watched people along the way. And I got to tell you, I'm not sure any of that has to do with whether that person is a outgoing, strong individual or whether they're just capable of mastering their own issues.
I was going to say there's a lot on the Harvard list that I like. The one that I like the best is practicing for pressure and developing a pre-performance routine because, in my experience, I got rid of my stage fright on CJAD, actually. They being thrown into breaking news environments, being on the spot covering things. You just can't mess up. So you have to have a system and a script and values going into these exercises so that you can handle you can weather the storm and be in my case at the time articulate when I'm covering a breaking news event or whatever. So it's it's for me. I found it's not any kind of innate skill set. It's just being prepared.
It's being prepared, and again, it's how you manage the situation. I mean, and I think obviously the more opportunity you get to be in more pressured scenarios and the more times you succeed at doing that, the more you automatically think you can do it. And right there, you're already starting to battle an obstacle. If you've got one pressure situation a year, you're going to be thinking about it for 364 days, and man, you're going to drive yourself insane. But if you're faced on a regular basis, like you're saying, Dan, you're thrown into something very quick, unexpected, and you handle it. Each time you remember how well you've done it, and the more opportunity, it's like anything else, right? You practice. The more opportunity you get to succeed, the more opportunity you get to score a goal, the more opportunity you get to throw a touchdown, the more you believe you can. And I think that's why a very large part of this is psychological. And when you ask me, do I think this is an innate or a learned? I think it's a very strong ability to be learned, but you need the support along the way as well.
Any final pieces of advice for entrepreneurs, especially lately, who feel, Mike, that they're under an increasing amount of pressure, but also pressure that's beyond their control, which is something that's it's difficult for a lot of people to process?
Yeah, the one thing I see a lot, and obviously living in the professional services world and the accounting world, is don't think too hard, guys. Don't overthink it. Do, do. And one of the big problems that that we see is this lack of execution. And it's always been one of my, if you ask me what my one piece of advice is for entrepreneurs, and one of them is always, one of the top three is always execution. And what defines that ability to succeed ultimately at the end of the day is your ability to execute. Well, if you overthink it and you keep deferring it and you don't go, it doesn't mean go in unprepared. It also doesn't mean spend an inordinate amount of time trying to determine how and solve it. At some point in time, you got to do, and do goes a long way in building confidence and recognizing that the occasional mistake is all part of life, and it's a learning curve, and it's not a, you got to make sure you don't do it on the things that make you go bankrupt, right? But if you're going to make mistakes, there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. It's part of my problem with the world right now with the kids growing up is this whole ability to either never make a mistake, or yeah, it's okay to constantly make mistakes. One way or another, there's got to be an accountability for the behavior, and there's got to be this learning that's going to create a whole bunch of momentum when you go forward.
Like, I know as a millennial, you'll be thrilled to hear this, but I was clearing out my parents' old house a couple weeks ago, and I did decide to throw out my baseball participation trophies. I tossed them.
You see, that one you might not be able to get me on. First of all, I'm not a millennial. I'd like to think I am, but I'm not. I'm a little older than that. I'm a Gen Xer crossing on baby boomer mindset. So but thanks for the compliment. Yeah, see, I can't get rid of those early trophies yet. That's still part of who I was as a kid. And even though I am no longer anywhere close to being that person I was as a kid, I'm not sure that kid wasn't a little more sincere, honest, and nice in the world. So hey, what do you want me to tell you? If you've overcome that, good for you. I'm not there yet.
All right, the results from the participation trophy comment is one eye roll from the Zillennial and one thumbs up from the Gen Xer. And let's get right to our profile for this week. Mike is the young founder of a company called Hookmotion. They are all about monitoring, and they're in the casino business now, but they want to sort of get into a whole bunch of businesses to deal with automated monitoring. And it evokes sort of images like we see in those old movies or even recent movies like Ocean's 11, right? You had the giant security apparatus behind the scenes at a casino, 70 people monitoring, 3,000 screens. Well, fast forward a few years, and a lot of this is getting replaced by AI.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This whole discussion on what Hookmotion is created, I think, is one more use of AI and where it's taking us. And you can talk about it in the environment of a casino, in protecting your assets and watching the patrons or watching your staff. But is that any different really than a retail store looking for shoplifters? I mean, the whole goal in a casino is to make sure that everything is running according to plan. And those of you that have ever been to a casino, the reality is somebody is always watching you and has always been watching you. Your example, Dan, of Ocean's 11 is a really good one. I think those of us that follow that kind of thing can see a whole bunch of people sitting in the back room, monitoring screens. I think what we're going to hear from Mathieu is this ability to use the technology to interact and to follow and to monitor, and then do something. More importantly, is do something with the information that comes out.
Let's introduce now the founder of Hookmotion, Mathieu Clas. Mathieu, welcome to today's Entrepreneur.
Hello, everybody.
Obviously, this came from an idea, sprouted from infancy. What prompted, was this a tech play and finding a use for it, or was this something that was initially designed for a specific use?
So we came up with this whole idea. It really is, I'd say, market pull. How it all came to be is actually I was finishing my bachelor in mechanical engineering, and I was in an entrepreneurship class. And it was at the ATS. So it was done with the Centec, which is an incubator. And it just so happens that Lotto Quebec was a partner, and they were there sort of looking for actually sort of interns, and they were presenting some of the challenges that they had basically around table games like blackjack, baccarat. And they present the issues or the challenges that they have, basically that these tables are in the end just two people, one in front of the other. There's no electronics, and tracking what's going on is very hard, which means that it's inevitable that there will be mistakes and errors and fraud. And when I learned about this issue, I think I had the same reaction as you did. I thought of movies, Ocean's 11, and I was like, I can't believe there's nothing existing like this yet. And so I started talking to them. I got really, really interested and committed in this project. And it really started from there. We went out, talked to other casinos, realized that this was a worldwide problem. and that's how we started the company.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at all of this, and you say, yeah, I can see this very, like a, eye in the sky mentality, which I think anybody who's ever frequented a casino knows that concept. But the discussion I think is much deeper than this. I mean, you brought up fixing mistakes, you brought up dispute resolution. You're bringing up the concept, obviously, of surveillance and making sure there's no fraud. But there's a lot of very legitimate business angles other than just trying to avoid fraud with what you guys are doing.
That's exactly right. Fraud and errors is a big factor when it comes to table games, but something else that comes up is that it's actually just hard to know what's going on in terms of how fast are my games going, how many people are usually they're playing, what are the favorite games of the players, what's the expected revenue that I should have. Casinos have very little tools right now to actually just track what's going on, so they just have to rely on, at the end of the day, open up their box, which cash was in, and try to figure out how much was lost that day. So there's a lot of information that casinos needs so that they can make better decisions and just know how they should run these table games. So there's
So,
lots of different angles to basically tracking these games.
so a lot of what I'm hearing from you is, this is an efficiency business model angling. There's potentially a marketing angle to all of this. When you get away from, like I said, the eye in the sky monitoring, there's a lot of very legitimate business angles, which I would have to assume are very useful at and applying across to other businesses. I mean, obviously, the frequency of transactions, the side of transactions, cash registers have done that for a lot of businesses in the past, but it hasn't necessarily worked out to how many people walk through the front door and how much they spent net.
hmm That's exactly right. I mean, we developed this expertise in basically we detect small objects and we track objects at a distance and in real time. And that's something that we can apply to different industries. And it's always in these industries where there's a lot of human interactions that are very hard to track. As you said, how many people are coming in, how are people walking around in a store, what sort of habits do people have, and what can we learn from them? So there's definitely applications in shrink in stores for theft, but also in industrial quality assurance or sort of tracking of speed of I don't know, on assembly lines, the speed of workers, or things of that nature.
So what do you respond to people that tell you you're creating, George Orwell's 1984, the Big Brother is always watching software? What's your answer to that? Because I'm sure there's a few people that have kind of given you that comment before.
Yeah. There's multiple things to it. I mean, first of all, what we do is help with people that are already sort of doing this job. They're just doing it manually with a piece of paper and an Excel spreadsheet. But also something that's important in what we do is we don't actually concentrate on who specifically. So we don't do any facial tracking. We don't sort of detect who that person is. We just want to know general information about the way that operations are in a specific place. So we're not here to track you specifically. We're here to understand how do people interact with this situation.
But so how do you? I mean, and it's a very noble cause, but how do you keep a casino or anybody else from not using this in a facial recognition or some kind of component at the end of the day that, it's been the discussion for years. I create this wonderful technology that could save the world, but if it falls into the wrong hands, it can be abused and misused. And I can see the same thing here. I can see so many practical business applications to this, but I can also see the negativity of somebody saying they saw Mike Newton, walk into the casino 8 times last week, and just like, of course, my phone doesn't hear what I'm saying, tracks my spending patterns.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is that in casinos right now, if you opt in, so that's something that you can already do if you want to become have a reward points and everything, then they will actually track you. They'll track how much you spend because they'll give you reward points. So actually, most of the time, players want that to get incentivized to do so the same way you might go to the SIQ and get a card for your points. So most often, that's something players actually want and opt in because they will get rewards for it. And then something else, as I said, we don't give that capability to actually track these people. And casinos actually are one of the places where privacy is a huge concern for them. So most casinos actually don't necessarily want to have that information available anywhere because they're always very, very afraid to basically lose the privacy of the players. A lot of people go to casinos, they want to have that stay private. That's not usually something that casinos actually specifically look to do, but trying to out who comes to their casino.
Right. I mean, but as a patron frequencing, if I choose not to take a points card, then I still recognize that the moment I walk into a public place, that it's still I just don't want to be followed subsequent to all of that. And I guess that's where, like anything else, I guess this will be an evolution of the utilization of software. And it's funny, while we're talking, I was thinking, I was watching the hockey game the other night, and between periods, they determined that there was 22 shots on net, and they can tell you exactly pinpoint where the shots have come from, and scoring chances, not a scoring chance. We do this for hockey, and here's an industry that, whether morally it's acceptable to everybody or not, and I know it's not in many cases, but here's an industry that's being run in certainly in Canada by the government. I mean, that ability to have access to data is huge. I mean, for years we kind of felt like they were running by the seat of their pants.
Yeah, I definitely understand the challenge here and the concern here, and that's something that we deal with every day. And part of the values that we have as a company, the most important one is trust and transparency, because these are important discussions that we do have with the people we work with, because it is a big concern. And to be honest, we don't necessarily have the right answer. We don't know what the answer is going forth in the future, but it's still a big concern that we have. So that's why, as of right now, it's very important to us to work with casinos and really understand their needs and the needs of their clients as well, and to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the amount of information that we can track.
So where I mean, obviously the morals and your values and what you're putting out there, some people would be very suspect based on the industry that you're in, and I
Mhm.
I don't necessarily share that, because I think that you can be moralistic and you can have proper values no matter what industry you may be in, and it's how you would adhere to them. The problem that you may have is ultimately, once it leaves your hands, that there's a lack of control subsequent to that. And so how will you decide who you're going to partner with, and where is this going to be purely mercenary, say, hey, anybody wants our software, we're going to sell? Or are you looking at this and saying, hey, there is a place for this, and we want to make sure it ends up a little bit like people working in the dealing towards the environment?
Mhm. No, definitely we do pick the people we work with. But I mean, something important to know about this technology, of course, if it somehow is stolen or leaked, people would have access to the code. But the way we interact with casinos, they have no way of changing any of the code or change what is the information that they're tracking. So we always have a hand in that. So it's not something that, I understand the fear, but in this specific case, in the way we operate, we have no interest in having our code sort of, open in the wild. We want to keep that to ourselves. So we obviously have control over what it is we track, and we can decide if there are certain informations we might not want to track.
And Mike, when we talk about the future of monitoring, obviously a lot of this is going to be done by AI, as we've mentioned in the past. But this is something that is going to be increasingly important to all business owners, especially those that are remote and watching their businesses from a distance.
And I think one thing we have to recognize is, we look at some of these because they're front and center. But if you have a smartphone, and you've shopped online, I hate to break it to you, but there is already an ongoing, shall we call it, monitoring that's occurring. So I don't want to to hit a couple of industries because they happen to be moving in a direction that our daily retail have moved at, and we kind of gave Mathieu a little bit of a grilling, I guess, in the first part of this. But there are some benefits to these things, and I think one of them, Mathieu, is the conflict resolution, which happens on a frequent basis at establishments, whether that's a store, or change that's been provided, or whether that is sitting at the blackjack table. There people make mistakes.
That's right. That's right. And to give an example, because we're really concentrated on table games right now, but it's something that we see happening. It's two people really playing one in front of the other. So errors and mistakes are bound to happen. And every time we talk to casinos, a story that they tell and that they're very proud of is every time the dealer might make a mistake and maybe not pay the right amount to a certain player, they love to be able to find that out, come back half an hour later, correct the mistakes, give them the money that was owed to them. Because a casino, what they really want is, what's really important to them is trust, and to be able to have the best client experience for their patrons. And so they want to know, hey, we made a mistake. The casino has to correct that for the client's benefit. So really, this is just about making the game as fair as possible and making sure that the rules are followed.
So the application to this, I mean, obviously, right now you're sitting with Lotto Quebec, and there are a number of other North American casinos. The casino model in Europe, or the casino model in Macau, or or on a cruise ship, have been very different over the years. Is this something that ultimately, from a software perspective, you're looking at trying to work with going forward?
Yes, really, we know that our software can benefit establishments all across the world. However, they will all be a little bit different. They'll be different in the sense of what games that they use. They'll be different in the way of what technology they're already using as of right now. And so the casinos are not all on the same level in terms of what information that they do gather as of right now and what information they do not have. So something big that we do to reach all of these different markets is that we concentrate on, software only. So we connect to existing overhead cameras. We don't want to add any extra hardware on the table. We want to make it as simple as possible to do this installation.
So basically, you're maintaining proprietary control over all of this. The IP is Hookmotions, and ultimately that ability to tailor, and whether it's a casino, whether it's a retail store, is a very viable option for you.
That's right.
So it begs the question: marketing. I mean, you kind of look at this and you say, hey, at the end of the day, does this type of thing sell itself? You have a great example with Lotto Quebec. Is it going to continue to sell to casinos or other applications, or are you guys pounding the pavement and continuing to sell this and move this forward like you would any other software play?
Mhm. For sure, the way to this market, it's a very niche industry, the casino industry. So it's a lot of direct contact, who and meeting people, one I guess introduction at a time. But the word goes fast. So in the beginning, it was very hard to get in touch with people. But the more people the easier it is to start talking to these casinos. It's as I said, it's niche, and it is a very concentrated industry. So when you go up to the big casinos, a lot of them are owned by only a few groups.
So when you move forward on this, I mean, obviously you're going to have to engage programmers. You're going to have to continue to build an infrastructure. If you start, going into retail, or you start going into other industries, it's I'm assuming it's going to cost a few dollars. What's the plan for either partnering financially, going to VCs? Have you looked at this yet? Is this something that is already in place, or where? I'd love to think you could finance this all by yourself, but I'm sure you're going to need some partners along.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I wish we could finance it all by ourselves, but I mean, we have been using all the resources that were available to us. That means that we have received some actual revenue from contracts, but we've also have raised what we call a pre-seed, so a first sort of round of investment, and we've been able to basically utilize a lot of different subsidies. So in Quebec and in Canada, we don't have the best access to, I guess, early stage investments, but to help these companies like ourselves, the government of Quebec and Canada have put a lot of different programs from the Ministère de l'Économie et de l'Innovation or the CNRC in Canada to help sort of businesses. So we've been utilizing a lot of these grants and subsidies to help us grow.
So Mathieu, these up an interesting point, and we had this on some other programs, and we'll continue to have this conversation going forward, which is, the public-private interaction going forward on development, and whether that's in healthcare, whether that's in technology, whether that is, in any area where government financing has traditionally been strong, and we all know that the public coffers are very low. So while you're working with Lotto Quebec, I mean, you're working with a government entity. Does a Lotto Quebec look at this purely for their own benefit, or is Lotto Quebec looking at this with you as, a bigger play at the end of the day?
For sure, a big goal of Lotto Quebec, and something that they always want to do and they're proud of, is they want to encourage and work with, Quebec-based companies, right? So a big thing here is, yes, they need this solution, but they also want to help startups build themselves up in Quebec and remain here. So they have these two goals in mind.
So again, a lot of people will pass judgment on the fact that it's the casino industry or the gambling industry, and there's no doubt that that is a moralistic approach that none of us have a right to question. But I think the important aspect here is to me, is the young entrepreneurial mindset of fresh out of school, trying to develop something, and like anything else that you develop, it can go for good or it can go for bad. And as you look down the road, there's a lot of opportunities for you guys, and I think that this is an important important element of Quebec technology. I mean, having come out of ETS and that continued development of things, I think is a very important and a very encouraging sign of the Quebec economy continuing to emerge. And like I said earlier, that if you think that you're not already being watched by your smartphone, then everybody needs to be realistic at the end of the day. And I think anything that's going to improve the position, but I can't guarantee, nor can you, I guess, the ultimate usage at the end of the day. And that's where all of us have to play our role in maintaining a strong and a sane environment. I guess my one last question to you really it revolves around working together. You started with classmates. You started developing something. What are the good and the bad, the happiness? I mean, is this a shared passion? Is this I recruited you? Like, there's obviously a lot that goes on in an early stage entrepreneurial environment, and for a lot of people, it's very scary, and for some, it's fascinating. What's it been like for you guys?
I think what most people say, it's a roller coaster. So there's very clearly some ups and downs. I think something big in the way we started is we were committed from the get-go, in the sense that, in a matter of weeks from hearing what the sort of the challenges are and understanding a bit more about the industry, we went all in. Basically, we all left our jobs and started working on the project full time. So that was something that was important to us because we were really committed to this project. But it also means that there were a whole lot of other extra pressures and stresses. We ate a lot of ramen, a lot of peanut butter for a long, long time, because we would feel, every ups and downs of the company, completely. But that's part of the fun. I do believe it's something that we enjoyed in a way, even the bad moments. It's something we could look back on, and we have many ups and downs that are, still to come. Right, that's just part of the life that we chose.
So starting off like you did, Mathieu, with a small environment, the reality of creating a corporate structure and an infrastructure. We all know accountants don't make good engineers, and engineers don't make good accountants, and neither one sometimes make really good programmers. So, how have you decided to build a corporate structure around what I guess started out is kind of a cross the table conversation?
Yeah, well, actually, it wasn't so bad. Yes, for sure. There was a lot of learning, and that's why we participated in many incubators. But for myself, I actually studied mechanical engineering, so I knew nothing about coding or computer vision, and that sort of helped me, because I have worked in R&D sector before, as a toy inventor, and before that on electric buses. But because this was totally out of my element, the actual technology, it allowed me to focus really on the business. And so when I talked to people that I wanted to join the team and do this project with me, I chose people who had different expertise in terms of programming, for example. So definitely was still a challenge in the beginning, because a lot of it was also just learning how to run a business or how to start a business. But it's something we grew into.
How many people are you now?
We're 8.
And when did when did you first kind of have the inkling or the seedling of this project? How many years ago?
So about 2.5, a bit more than 2.5 years ago. So as I said, it went very fast. I think I heard about the problem in March. In April, I had my first presentation to Lotto Quebec. And in May, we all quit our jobs and started the company.
That I call that a leap of faith. And what do you think, Dan? I call that a leap of faith on my end.
Confidence. I love it. I mean, it's when you quit a job to start your passion project, you can only respect that. Mathieu Clas of Hookmotion, thanks so much for dropping by.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Our guest is Mathieu Clas. We'll have his one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur on the way. But first, let's speak to Jean-François Audette, partner and VP at Le Groupe Fuller Landau. He'll talk to us about the importance of due diligence in a business transaction. And Mike, like you say, due deal, extremely important if you're in a growing tech company, multiple investors, new partners. You got to look at the paperwork.
Yeah, I'm going to start even before that, because I think the purpose of why you're doing a transaction is a very important question to ask. The guys that are going to do the due diligence work. So we're going to talk to JF in a second about actually doing the due diligence work. But to me, the very first question you ask yourself is, why am I getting into this transaction? Why am I looking at buying in this business? Am I looking to integrate suppliers? Am I looking to integrate products? Am I doing this for personnel? Why am I buying or looking to do a merger with somebody? And once you get that question answered, now you can take and build a direction. And many of the due deals I've seen go wrong over the years have been very poor initial purpose. Okay. And I guess it's like, Simon Sinek says it's why, begin with the end. It's very similar when it comes to this discussion of due diligence. And JF, I mean, why is due diligence a must? Why would anybody go there? Why would anybody spend the money to do what you do?
Well, first, just a little bit of perspective. So, the due diligence in the current market, which is pretty hot, by the way, in Canada specifically, we're back to the pre-pandemic levels, and we're on track to have a 2021 year, which will be stellar in terms of M&A. So, with this said, and also with the significant amount of liquidity available in the market, you want to make sure that it is invested where you'll get the best return. And not only that, but you want to make sure as a purchaser that you're not getting into something messy, or at the very least, I mean, if you want to know what risk you're facing and what challenges are upon you if the transaction is to close. So there are many angles to a due diligence. It's not just the financials that we would typically think of. I mean, yes, it's a big chunk. You want to better know the business. You want to understand if there's a concentration where, the whole business model relies on one or two vendors that are controlling your supply chain. And, at the opposite, how many clients are you servicing? Are you a type of business that, has one big client representing more than 80% of your top line that you're kind of dependent upon? If it goes bankrupt, well, what's next? What do you do? How do you, find that profitability? Also for, the accounting policies, you want to know how aggressive the accounting policies are, because that could, at some point in time, if you are being audited, it could trigger, tax assessments. So there's also the HR angle. Like you want to better know what the people in place are capable of, what are their skills, what's the turnover. There's an environmental component to a transaction as well. So there are many different angles to a transaction, and it's not the typical financial that you would think of. So that's a big amalgamation of all these little things.
So when I look at due diligence, I've always looked at it in two elements. I've looked at, am I getting what I think I'm getting? Right. So there's that first angle. And the second is, what am I getting that I don't know about? And those to me, are the two big questions that I've always asked is, and obviously in order to do due diligence, and if I'm walking into your office and I say, hey, I want to know what I'm getting, and I want you to tell me what I don't know what I'm getting. What do you include in the due diligence? How do you structure something? How do you look in to try and answer those two questions?
So the way we're going to be structuring the due diligence, well, at the end of the day, it's still a financial transaction. You're paying a big price to get something. So there's always the financial angle that will be a big chunk of the due deal. So there's the concept of looking at the profitability, and you want to be able to normalize that profitability, including the post-acquisition synergies, and to adjust the current profitability for those items that will not be recurring in essence for the future. So you can think about management paying out bonuses. You can think of management having kids on the payroll that are not necessarily working there. So these are the little things that you want to fully grasp, so you can come up with your normalized EBITDA. And at that moment, your normalized EBITDA, you can convert that into a metric, which is the multiple. How much are you paying for the business in terms of EBITDA multiple? And thereafter, you can benchmark that a metric against either publicly traded companies and past transactions, just to make sure that you're not paying too much for that company. There is a very interesting point that you've mentioned, Mike, in the intro about the people. And in this market, there we're talking about the Great Resignation, and more transactions are really driven by those getting access to that workforce, which is not something that we were necessarily seeing in the past, but this is becoming something pretty big and pretty important from a purchaser standpoint of view. So, and again, we've touched on the environment also a bit. So, you can always run some background checks on companies that own businesses just to look at the historical behind it to see, before that business or before that building, what was there? Like, did we have a gas station 30 years ago that, might lead to some, oil spill issues that, if I buy that business, I'm going to be liable for. So again, it's a moving target, right? And as you go into the process based on the findings, there's always more that you can add to the scope. And that's where I say it's a moving target, because yes, you come up with a work frame at the beginning, but it's going to move during the work. There's going to be things you'll be finding. There's going to be things that you'll be drilling down much more because you found something. So again, it's not like there's a checklist, but when you look at the checklist at the beginning of the engagement and the checklist when you're done, well, it's not necessarily the same thing.
I think one of the important elements, JF, on all of this is, a lot of people look at due diligence as black and white. A lot of people look at it as, checking the boxes and a checklist, running the numbers from a B-valuation perspective. But I think there's also a very soft element to all of this. And I think that goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning, which is, what is the intention and what is the purpose of you doing a transaction? And, you said it very well when it comes to resources and people you're getting. Very difficult to quantify the value associated with, and I think you have to be willing to incorporate that into your valuation component as well.
Jean-François Audet, partner and VP at Le Groupe Fuller Landau. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Dan.
And at the end of every show, as we like to do, we turn to our guest, Mathieu Clas, founder of Hookmotion, and we ask you, Mathieu, for your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur, please.
Right. I guess my one piece of advice comes back to a bit, I guess, of what I did, but I think it's really important to as soon as you can, commit to your project, even though you're not exactly sure exactly what it is you want to do. Maybe there's always going to be improvements, and the only way to find out if your idea is good, if you need to change it, is to actually go out there and ask people and talk about it. So I think the best way to really start something is you have to commit from the get-go, right? So that would be my one piece of advice. And also, just don't be afraid to ask for help. We have so many different programs and so many people that are so willing to help entrepreneurs that you shouldn't be afraid to ask if you want to learn something new.
Excellent. I think great. I'm going to finish off on a really professional, classy note. This whole conversation reminds me a little bit of Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. And I think, Mathieu, the strength of the work that you guys are putting together is like any other business or any other entity. It's what you do with it and how you apply it. And kudos to you for getting this off the ground. And I think your challenge will likely come in the way you guys decide you want to be perceived and how you want to be used. So yeah, always remember those words of Spider-Man: with great power comes great responsibility.
Mathieu Clas, Hookmotion, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And a reminder, you can subscribe to Today's Entrepreneur as a podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite platform. And log on to today'sentrepreneur.org and listen to hundreds of those local entrepreneur profiles as well. See you back here next week.
Thanks, Dan.
This has been a production of TNKR Media. Good talk.